Thank you very much. It's a really pleasure to have the opportunity to present some experience from Norway. I will try to share my screen. I hope you see it now. So,
Да, видно. Все отлично.
Yeah, good. About electric transportation in Norway. Let's see. I just have there. So what I plan to say is starting with update you on the status of how far we are with electrification in the transport sector, but also to emphasize the background, because each country are different and there are some specific reasons why Norway has the position it has on electric transport, that it's not so easy to copy, but it's possible to learn from it, of course, and take some of the experience that we have made during this way. And at the end, I will talk more about this charging infrastructure, as I understand that's of a special interest. For those who are not so familiar with Norway, I have a map here and an arrow showing where Norway is. It's in the northern part of Europe. And Norway have some feature that is very similar to Kyrgyzstan. We are a mountain country. Of course, our mountains is not so high, but as we are further north, the nature is still kind of similar. And also that we have the high mountains means we, together with Kyrgyzstan, is the countries that have the biggest share of hydropower in our electricity supply system. And we are just 5 million inhabitants. Norway is not formally a part of European Union, but we are a kind of associated members. So most of the European Union regulations is also valid for Norway. And beside having an electricity sector with 100% renewables, we are also an oil and gas nation. But most of that is offshore production and it's exported. But it's, of course, a big industry in Norway. Together with fish, and we have aluminium, metallic, metallurgic industry that are built up around the hydropower. And we have a lot of shipping and offshore services and tourism. So that's our main kind of industries, just for your information. When it's come to electric cars, from the about 3 million cars, talking about smaller cars, we have in Norway today, more than 400,000 are electric cars. And if you look at the sales statistics from September this year, from the new cars that were sold in September, from the cars sold to private persons, 91% was electric cars. But for company cars, a smaller percentage, just a little bit more than half of the cars was electric. And the reason for this difference is the support scheme. So this support scheme is more favorable for private people than for companies. But it's also a decision by the government that by 2025, all cars sold in Norway should be electric, or not necessarily electric, but zero emission cars. So it could also be hydrogen or other technologies, but in practice, there's very few hydrogen cars. So we're talking about electric cars. Also, it's good to know about the energy consumption of these cars. Of course, converting to electricity make the cars much more energy efficient because it's not a lot of waste heat as it with fossil fuel cars. And if all the cars in Norway was converted to electric, as it will be when the old cars is taken out to the market, the total consumption will be about 9.4 terawatt hours. And in our context, we don't consider this as a big energy consumption that will make any big problem for the electricity system. So it's not the consumption itself that is a challenge, but it could be a challenge with the effect when all charge at the same time. I will come back to that. So of course, Norway is in a really unique position in the world. I think in European Union as such, in average, there are, from the new cars sold today, is less than 10% is electric. So when Norway has this unique position is because of the history and the support scheme that has been established. But also update you a little bit on other means of transport, for instance, electric buses. So most of the new buses now is electric. And when they talk about city buses that are running kind of regular roads that are not too long and they're possible to charge. Like this one is charging at their end stop. So I don't have the national figures, but today in Oslo, about 40% of all the buses are electric. And the green one there is from my small community just outside Oslo, from a newspaper cut. For those who don't understand Norwegian, they say that just to show that it's not always easy to convert. So that first the new buses couldn't be charged, and now it's not possible to put on the snow chain on the buses for using in the winter. So this was not kind of big problem, but it's just to indicate that there's a lot that has to be adapted when you change from one type of buses to another. So although these starting problems, now they are running beside my window for every 10 minutes and without problems. So when this comes to cars and buses, this is nothing that are kind of unique for Norway. What's more unique for us is the shipping industry, as we are a nation that with a long coastline. We have a lot of ferries going to the islands and crossing fjords. As it says here, about 132 ferry roads. And the first one was converted to electricity 6 years ago. And the biggest one, as you see on the picture here, is almost 140 meters long and with 4.3 megawatt hour batteries. So it's totally different than for cars. And this is where Norway see its industrial competence can be used and where we can make business out of this. Because Norway don't have a big car industry and we have not been able to sort of benefit from being a pioneer in electric cars. But for the shipping industry, this is important industrial development as well. But it doesn't stop there. This is just one example. When we're going to charge ferries and soon we're going to charge airplanes, this need a lot of electricity, and it's difficult to, if all the consumption are at the same time. So this is an example of a cluster that go together with the airport, harbor, and industrial area where they can plan so that the electricity is distributed according to the needs better than if just all consumers have a independent connection. So inside this hub, they will kind of share their access to electricity. That makes it cheaper because you don't have to develop so strong grid. But back to history. As I said, Norway never benefit from being pioneer on electric car, but it was actually a kind of pioneering industry that started the electricity mobility activities in Norway. So we had one factory that started to produce electric cars early in 1990s. So this was the small red one. It was never a big success because the battery technology back then was not so good. So they have a short range. They could drive like 50 kilometers before they needed charge. And they were small, just for 2 persons, and light. And of course, people felt a little bit sorry for those guys driving those small, funny looking cars. So it was easy to establish a support scheme for those cars. And that was, of course, a support for the consumers, but it was as much a support for the industry, that it should create a market for the Norwegian production of electric cars. Although they were never kind of successful in the market because they were maybe too early, they were quite advanced. So the picture on the right was one of the kind of prototypes that never went into production, but was an ordinary family car that could have a market share if it was ever produced. The guy in front of the red car is the director of Ford, the big American Ford company. So at some time they bought this factory and want to take over the production and make it worldwide. And they started to import some cars to US. And the main reason for that was regulations in California that obliged all companies to reduce their emission for the fleet they are selling. So if they could sell some zero emission cars, they could sell more of the polluting car because it was the average that counted. But at some time they were Ford and other automakers managed to lobby California, so this regulation was removed, and Ford was then not more interested in producing electric cars, so that was the end of the story for Tink cars. But we then had a support scheme for electric cars in Norway that was established 20 years ago to support these funny small cars running around. And it was the biggest part of the support was that it was accepted from value-added tax. In Norway, value-added tax is 25%, so it's quite a good subsidy. And it was also exempted for other taxes that we have on cars. Traditionally in Norway, we have huge tax on cars. So cars has been very expensive in Norway compared to other European countries. But it was not enough. So the cars also was exempted for toll roads. We have a lot of toll roads because new roads are often developed with that the users had to pay. So we pay when we drive into the cities, and we pay when we drive on the highways and so on. And they also was offered by the cities, most of the cities, free parking. Often it's expensive to park in cities, but this small car, few small cars, you can park free. And even more popular was that you can drive in the public bus lane. You see this on the picture, the small green one. Have the whole lane for themselves and just passing the queue. And of course, that's popular. That was the way of support. But gradually this supports, when it's become more cars, it was not possible to have all of them in the bus lane. So now you have more limitation there. You can do it if you are more people in the car and you on certain hours and so on. But the economic benefits are still there. That has made the cars, electric cars, kind of similar in price with an ordinary fossil fuel car. If I go and buy a car, I will pay the same for electric car as for an ordinary car in similar size. Actually, for big cars, electric cars has become bigger because then the taxes are bigger on bigger cars. And since now 91% of the private purchase of cars are electrical, this subsidy has been huge. So I just calculated that for the money that the state don't get from this tax, you could employ 20,000 nurses or teachers or state employees. 20,000 is a huge number. So if you look at it today, this kind of subsidy would never be possible to establish with such big numbers. But back in those days, with a few cars, small cars, it was possible. And when it just was there, it hasn't been possible to remove it. Yesterday, we got a new government, and the government announced that they will start to reduce these subsidies. And of course, today it's not so big problem to reduce the subsidies because the market is for electric cars is much bigger. The prices go down, and in some years we expect that electric cars will be cheaper than petrol cars. And also many automakers are saying that in a few years they will stop producing petrol and diesel cars. Yeah. So about the charging, that's of course also have some historical roots. So with these small first cars, it was ordinary to charge them at home with an ordinary home connection. It was just 3 kilowatt charging and also the municipality put up some charging points, very small ones at parking lots. So it was not a big issue to develop the infrastructure. As I said, the range for those cars was mostly about 50 kilometers, so it was not a huge amount of electricity needed. As the cars has become bigger and the charging needs increased, most electric car owners charge the cars at home. And to do that, they have a special charger that you can see on the picture below. A home charger is a kind of smart charger, as we call them. And depending on your electrical installation at home, they charge from 7 to 22 kilowatt. And this is the basic electricity supply for the Norwegian electric car fleet. And it makes it cheap for people to charge. It's not so expensive to buy this charger, and they just have the ordinary electricity price. And when it says smart, it means that the charger charges the cars when you have free capacity in the electricity network. If it's limitation in the house and you put on the dishwasher or heating water or some other energy demand at home, the charger will turn down. But when there are free capacity in the house, the electricity will go to the car. And also it's often connected with the forecast for electricity prices that are most people with electric car have a tariff that they have different electricity prices over the day. So in the morning and afternoon, the prices are high when everyone uses electricity. But during nighttime, for instance, it's normally cheaper, and then you charge the car at the cheapest time. And this also very good for the electricity system. If everyone would put on the car charger at times where it's already high demands in the electrical grid, it will result in a big investment need to develop the grid, to make stronger grid and have a system that could meet the hour with the highest demand. But with this smart charger, where you move to periods with low load, you can take much more electricity without needing to develop the capacity. So this, Norway is a country with majority of people live in single-family houses, but of course, many people also live in cities and in apartment houses, and here it's more complicated. So some apartment houses that have their own parking has established same kind of home charger at the parking lots. And it's actually been a law giving a person the right to establish his own charging place in such private parking places. It was really a challenge in the beginning, but now with the law and the understanding from the building association, it's kind of solved. And it's also been public support schemes to support building association to develop the charging facilities. And it's been necessary for many of them to invest in upgrade of the electricity supply. But again, the smart chargers help because it's sharing the free capacity among the cars. And the municipalities has also dedicated some street parking, or a lot of street parking actually, to electric cars, and given the opportunity to private companies to put up commercial chargers. So it's very few charging stations that are publicly owned. It's always kind of private-public partnership where you help the companies to find suitable places, and the company invest in the charger, and they will get charge those who use it money for charging. So this is also relatively small, like 7 to 22 kilowatt capacity for this charger. So it's meant for parking overnight and having you charging when the car is anyway parked. And of course, you also need a network of what we call supercharger with high capacity, like 50 to 150 and even more kilowatt effect. On the picture is the northernmost car charger in the world, in Hammerfest, in the very north of Norway. This is also a commercial market. But again, it's needed a cooperation between the companies that provide the charger and the public that need to regulate to give access to the grid and to give space for the charger. And the biggest challenge often is to find a suitable place where you have a grid with the necessary strength and it's accessible with the cars and there are some space to develop it. And but also it's popular to develop this charger. Like if you have a restaurant along the highway, it's good to have a charger because then people going by will anyway have to stop and charge. And when they have to wait 20 minutes for charging, of course, they have to buy something. So it's a good combination. So in general, this has developed, I would say in the beginning, it was needed to, when it was few cars, it was needed to develop, and it's like companies like Tesla has built their own charging station that is just for Tesla, and they have been doing this by themselves. But for the other brands, it's also been developed more or less by their own, because the traction, when so many people buy electric car, the car industry and the business see that this is a growing market and they want to be there from the beginning in order not to get lost. So I think they have invested money, and it will take time before the companies take it back, but they see it as a kind of being positioned for future big market share. And also the petrol station. Most of the petrol stations are, of course, very afraid of losing out in business, so they have also built up superchargers along with the pumps for petrol and diesel. So we have some challenges as a consumer, because there's so many different companies building charging station, and they all have all their own schemes. So you have to be a kind of member or have their mobile app from that company. So you end up with having a lot of deals to be able to charge wherever you go. So this is something the government is working on now to kind of develop a standard. So you can understand the pricing system and you can charge on all the charge stations, not having to be a member of all of them. But to charge on these superchargers are expensive, because there's a big investment. They have to take this money from the consumers. So you pay much, much more than the ordinary electricity price. So compared to charge at home, it may be 2 or 3 times more expensive. So this is something you just do when you are long distance driving. So you're not going home during night, or you can charge slowly at home. And it's some limitation also on special tourist places, or in holidays where everyone is going the same direction. It can be a queue on those chargers. So at the end, I just like to comment a little bit on how this is sort of linked to Norwegian climate policy. So Norway, like European Union, has a target of 50 to 55 reduction in 2030. Actually, the new government yesterday confirmed that the target is 55, not 50. But so far, Norway has not reduced emissions like most European countries. Today's emissions are about the same as it was in 1990. And it's 2 main reasons for that. And that's the cars, that we have huge increase in car traffic since 1990. And as this increase has been on petrol and diesel, it's increased the emissions quite a lot. And second is that we have also a huge increase in oil and gas production. And the emissions from the production facilities has also increased. So this is the 2 main challenges that Norway had to address to reach these targets. And of course, on transport, we are on the way to find a solution, as in practical all new cars are electric. So it will be just a matter of a year before the petrol and diesel cars are taken out of use. And ironically enough, there's the same strategy for offshore oil and gas production, that these installations will be electrified. So having a cable from land, or by building offshore wind installations connecting the platforms. So electrification is the main strategy for climate mitigation in Norway. So that was my presentation. Thank you.